The apartment on Park Avenue used to feel warm when Garrett Sloane walked through the door. Tonight, the sound of his keys scraping against the lock only made the space feel colder. Harper Lane stood near the hallway, her hands clasped together so tightly her knuckles blanched. She had learned to brace herself before he entered nights like this, carried the scent of perfume that didn't belong to her, and the faint trace of champagne from rooftop lounges she'd never been invited to. Garrett stepped inside, adjusting his rumpled suit jacket. Even in the dim hallway light, she could see the smear of lipstick he'd missed along his collar. He didn't bother to hide it anymore. "Where's Sam?" he asked, his tone clipped, impatient as if he had somewhere better to be. Harper swallowed. "In the living room. He made something today." Garrett smirked, already expecting the usual welcome, their son running toward him, arms open, asking about his day. But when he walked into the living room, he stopped. The familiar crayon family portrait, the one Sam had drawn last fall, no longer showed their family of 3. The small, bright drawing now had a new figure where Dad used to be. The face was different. The suit was different. And beneath it, in shaky handwriting, Sam had written a new word. Rowan. Garrett's jaw tightened. What is this supposed to mean? Harper couldn't breathe. Her heart pounded so loudly she barely heard the quiet footsteps behind her, just as Rowan Mercer appeared at the doorway, holding the Kindle she'd forgotten at the art studio. Garrett turned slowly, his expression darkening as realization settled over him. And in that heavy silence, the first crack in their broken marriage finally split wide open. Harper Lane had not always lived on Park Avenue. Before the polished marble floors and the quiet hum of a luxury refrigerator she rarely opened, her life was filled with small apartments, second-hand furniture, and evenings spent sketching by the window of a cramped childhood bedroom. She grew up in Ohio, raised mostly by a grandmother who stitched quilts for extra money and taught Harper that art could mend what life broke. Her mother had left when she was 8. Her father worked double shifts and spoke little. Loneliness had shaped Harper long before marriage ever did. By the time she reached college, she had learned to hide her softness behind polite smiles and careful words. She studied fine arts and worked 2 part-time jobs to stay afloat. That's where she first crossed paths with Garrett Sloane, a man who walked into the campus gallery wearing confidence like a tailored suit. He wasn't wealthy yet, but he had the ambition of someone who believed the world owed him a favor. He told Harper she was special. He said her gentleness steadied him. For a young woman with abandonment woven into her bones, his attention felt like safety. But marriage had a way of revealing truth slowly, like paint seeping through wet canvas. Garrett's ambition hardened. His tenderness shrank. The man who once brought her sketchbooks just because became the man who questioned why she needed so much time for silly drawings. He controlled their finances early on, for stability, he said. And Harper, eager to be a good wife, agreed. Over the years, Garrett's success grew, and Harper's world grew smaller. Her job as an art assistant at a Manhattan studio became her only space untouched by judgment. Still, she loved being a mother. Sam, with his round cheeks and thoughtful eyes, became the only place where Harper felt she mattered. She read to him every night, filled the apartment with crayons and paper, taught him how colors could speak, feelings children didn't yet have words for. But love alone couldn't shield her from the truth. Sam had begun to flinch when Garrett raised his voice. He no longer ran to the door when he heard keys. Harper noticed everything, every shrinking gesture, every forced smile. And tonight, seeing Rowan unexpectedly at the doorway, with Sam's altered drawing on the wall, Harper realized something even more frightening. The life she thought she could quietly endure was about to collapse in a way she could no longer control. The Sloane residence on Park Avenue was the kind of home people admired from the street. Floor-to-ceiling windows glittered above the city, catching the light from passing taxis and the glow of the Manhattan skyline. Inside, everything was arranged with precision, crystal vases that Harper never filled because Garrett preferred minimalism. A Mont Blanc pen left casually on the marble kitchen counter, as if to remind visitors of success, and a framed architectural print, he claimed, symbolized ambition. Yet for all its beauty, the apartment felt colder with every passing year. Harper often walked through the rooms late at night, breathing in the silence, wondering how a life so carefully built could feel so fragile. The luxury that once dazzled her now felt like a museum display, untouched, distant, and belonging more to Garrett's ego than to their family. Her classroom at the art studio, with mismatched stools and paint-spattered tables, felt more like home than this immaculate penthouse ever did. Outside, winter crept along Central Park, frosting the treetops and coating the sidewalks with a thin, shimmering layer of ice. Harper loved the view from the balcony, the way the city lights softened the loneliness, but lately she couldn't step outside without remembering the nights she'd stood there waiting for Garrett, staring at the empty street below as snow fell quietly like unanswered prayers. Garrett, meanwhile, spent most evenings in Midtown, boardrooms or upscale lounges with dim lighting and imported whiskey. He returned home smelling of car service, leather seats, and unfamiliar perfume. The doorman had stopped meeting Harper's eyes weeks ago, as if he knew more than he wished to say. Still, there were moments when the facade shimmered, almost fooling her. Like on Saturday mornings, when the sunlight pooled across the hardwood floors and Sam sat cross-legged with his crayons, humming softly. Harper would sit beside him, sketching quietly, letting herself imagine a different life, one where love didn't feel like tiptoeing around broken glass. But the truth hung in the air like a draft no heater could fight. The apartment was too clean, too quiet, too staged. It was a place meant for photographs, not memories. And as Harper stood alone in the kitchen later that evening, staring at the glowing skyline through the reflection on the glass, she couldn't shake the feeling that something in this home was shifting. The walls felt thinner, the shadows felt heavier, and in her chest, a warning whispered louder than ever. Something was coming, something she was no longer sure she could stop. Madison Price entered Garrett Sloane's life the way a spark slips into dry timber, quiet at first, then catastrophic. She was 26, polished in a way that didn't come naturally but looked expensive. Every detail of her was intentional. The sleek blonde hair, the fitted dresses, the effortless confidence that masked a hunger for status. She worked in PR at Garrett's firm, but everyone understood that her position had very little to do with communications and everything to do with proximity. Garrett liked proximity, especially to admiration. Madison knew how to flatter him, how to laugh at his jokes, how to touch his arm just long enough for him to feel chosen. She made him feel young again, powerful again, adored again, things he hadn't felt at home in years. Not because they were missing, but because he had stopped looking for them where they truly lived. At first, Madison played innocent. "I didn't know he was married," she told coworkers, though she had studied Garrett's background long before their first late-night meeting. She liked men with ambition, and Garrett's ambition leaked from his every word. She liked men with something to lose too, because that meant if they fell hard, and Madison had always wanted to watch the world rearrange itself around her. She began sending Garrett messages at odd hours, disguised as work emergencies. He always replied. Then came drinks after meetings, then dinners, then nights. The more he drifted, the more control Madison felt. And control, to her, was sweeter than affection. She pushed boundaries slowly. A lipstick mark left where Harper would see it, a whisper to a receptionist about Garrett's stressful marriage. A photo taken in a dimly lit restaurant, her hand resting dangerously close to his. She wanted Harper to know, to feel inferior, to break. But Madison underestimated quiet women, especially quiet women who had endured far worse in life than a mistress with too much perfume. Garrett, meanwhile, leaned deeper into the fantasy. Madison praised him, stroked his ego, made him believe he deserved more attention, more admiration, more freedom. He didn't realize he was being handled like a fragile instrument, guided exactly where Madison wanted him. And what Madison wanted wasn't love. It was elevation. She watched Garrett unravel late nights, financial secrets, half-truths he thought she didn't hear. It thrilled her. Because the closer he came to losing balance, the closer she came to seizing everything. One evening, after yet another night at her apartment, she traced a finger along his jaw and whispered, "You're almost mine." Garrett didn't notice the calculation in her eyes, but Harper would. And when she did, the game Madison had started would ignite a fire no one could contain. The first night Garrett didn't come home, Harper convinced herself it was a late meeting. The second night, she blamed traffic. By the third, she stopped asking questions because the answers no longer came with explanations, just silence followed by the faint smell of someone else's perfume. The kind you only find in dim lounges, where the lighting hides more than it reveals. Garrett's absences grew predictable in their unpredictability. He would leave the penthouse wearing a tailored suit and a rehearsed smile, muttering something about quarterly reviews or emergency strategy calls. Harper would stand at the door, holding Sam's hand, watching the elevator swallow him whole. Hours later, she would sit alone at the edge of their bed, listening to the distant hum of the city. Her phone stayed beside her, screen glowing in the dark. No messages, no updates. Just the emptiness of a marriage being hollowed out one night at a time. Sometimes, she would step onto the balcony and look toward Midtown, where skyscrapers blinked like tired eyes. Somewhere out there, Garrett was entertaining clients, or claiming to. In truth, he was likely sitting across from Madison Price, leaning too close, sipping whiskey he couldn't afford, drowning in debts he refused to admit existed. Harper didn't know about the debts yet. She only knew the lies. Sam began to notice too. He would crawl into Harper's lap at night and whisper, "Is Daddy lost?" Harper would stroke his hair, unable to answer. Each question scraped against her heart like sandpaper. The doorman avoided eye contact when she passed. The building concierge, usually talkative, became strangely quiet. People knew things Harper was always the last to learn. One night, after promising he'd be home for dinner, Garrett texted, "Running late, don't wait up." The message arrived at 11:57 p.m. Harper stared at it until the screen dimmed. Her dinner had gone cold. Sam's drawings were scattered across the table. A small crayon portrait of three figures, Mommy, Daddy, and Sam, sat torn at the edge. Harper pressed her palm against her chest, fighting the heaviness gathering there. She tried to breathe, but the room felt tight, the air too thin. Moments later, her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Garrett. It was an automated alert, a charge on their joint account at a luxury hotel bar, a place Garrett had never taken her, a place Madison was known to frequent. Harper's hand trembled as she lowered the phone, and for the first time, she felt something colder than suspicion, certainty. And certainty, she would soon discover, was only the beginning of the storm. Sam had always been a bright, gentle child, one of those little boys who colored outside the lines not out of carelessness, but out of imagination. Yet in the past months, something inside him had dimmed. Harper noticed it first in the way he stopped running to the front door at the sound of Garrett's footsteps in the hallway. Then it was the way he no longer asked to wait up for Daddy when bedtime came and went, with no sign of him returning home. One afternoon, Harper arrived at the art studio early to pick him up from the children's workshop. She watched through the half-open door as he sat quietly by himself, crayon in hand, drawing with a seriousness a 5-year-old shouldn't know. The other kids laughed and chattered, but Sam worked silently, shoulders tense, lips pressed into a thin line. When she finally stepped in, he looked up with a forced smile that broke her heart. "Did Daddy come home last night?" he asked in a soft, careful voice. Harper hesitated. "No, sweetheart. He had to work late." Sam stared at the paper in front of him. A drawing of a tall man, faceless, standing far away from a smaller figure that looked unmistakably like himself. "He's always working," Sam whispered, almost to himself. Harper knelt beside him. "Daddy loves you. He's just busy." But Sam shook his head slowly. "If he loved me, he would come home. If you ons of the dough." The simplicity of the statement cut through her like cold wind. Children had a way of telling truths adults were too afraid to speak. That night, Sam refused to sit in his father's chair at the dinner table. He pushed the plate away, tears welling in his eyes for reasons he couldn't articulate. Harper tried to soothe him, holding him close, but his small voice trembled as he confessed, "I don't want Daddy to yell anymore." Harper froze. Garrett never yelled at Sam, at least, not in her presence. But she'd noticed how the boy flinched when Garrett raised his voice at her. How he hid behind the couch when Garrett slammed a door. How he traced circles on his arm whenever Garrett walked past him too quickly. Signs she had ignored, signs she could no longer ignore now. Later that evening, after Sam finally fell asleep clutching his stuffed bear, Harper moved through the dim apartment, her breaths unsteady. She felt a shift, like the ground beneath her was preparing to break open. And then her phone buzzed with a message she never expected to see. A message that would make everything unravel even faster. Rowan Mercer first appeared in Harper's life quietly, the way gentle things tend to enter the lives of people who have suffered too much noise. He wasn't loud or boastful like the men who filled Garrett's world. He didn't stride into rooms expecting admiration. He wasn't even supposed to know Harper beyond polite greetings exchanged in the hallway of the children's art studio. But Rowan noticed small things that most people stepped over without a second glance. He noticed how Harper held her shoulders just slightly too tightly, as if bracing against an invisible storm. He noticed how Sam clung to her coat at pickup time. He noticed the exhaustion behind her smile, the kind that doesn't show up overnight but from years of being the only one holding the family together. Rowan came from a different world: quiet confidence, understated wealth, the kind accumulated by someone who didn't need to prove anything. His foundation funded the art programs at the very studio where Harper worked. Still, he always introduced himself simply as Sam's friend's dad, never mentioning the Mercer name unless necessary. One afternoon, while Harper helped the children wash paint from their hands, Rowan approached with a gentle nod. "Sam's work is impressive," he said. "There's a depth to the way he uses color. Children don't paint like that unless they feel a lot." Harper swallowed hard. "He feels more than he should." Rowan didn't pry. He simply nodded. A man who understood that pain didn't need translation. Over the next few weeks, he began appearing at the studio early, not to hover, not to intrude, but to watch the children's pieces being hung on the drying racks. He praised every child with equal warmth, but he always saved a softer tone for Sam. It wasn't favoritism, it was recognition. One evening, after Sam had run ahead to look at a mural the older kids were painting, Rowan spoke quietly. "If you ever need help, even just someone to listen, you can call me." Harper stiffened. She wasn't used to kindness without strings. Garrett's affection had always come with conditions, invisible weights she carried alone. Rowan, sensing her unease, added, "No pressure. I just know what it's like when home stops feeling like home." The words struck her deeper than she expected. She wanted to ask what he meant, what he had lived through, what kind of wounds he carried, but she didn't. Some truths were shared only when the heart was ready. That night, as Harper tucked Sam into bed, she found a small folded paper in his backpack. It was a drawing, Sam, holding hands with two adults. One was clearly her. The other wasn't Garrett. It was Rowan. Her breath caught, and when she turned the paper over, the word written on the back changed everything. Garrett came home early that evening, a rare event that should have been a gift, but instead carried a storm behind it. He entered the apartment with the loud, restless energy of a man who had been drinking just enough to be agitated, not enough to stumble. Harper knew the signs all too well. The moment she heard the door slam, her stomach tightened. Sam had been sitting at the kitchen table, coloring quietly, humming a soft tune. The moment Garrett's steps echoed down the hall, the humming stopped. His little shoulders tensed, and his crayon rolled from his fingers to the floor. "Hey, buddy," Garrett said, forcing a brightness that sounded like a threat more than affection. "What are you drawing?" Harper moved instinctively closer to Sam, but before she could respond, Sam lifted the picture. It was a simple sketch. Sam holding hands with Harper and Rowan. Garrett wasn't in it, not even in the background. Garrett's smile faded. "Where am I?" Sam didn't look up. "You're not home," he said softly. "So, you're not in the picture." End quote. End quote. Take 7, end quote. The words pierced the room like a shard of glass. Harper felt the air shift. Garrett's jaw clenched, his hand curling at his side. "What did you say?" he demanded, stepping closer. Sam shrank back. Harper moved between them, her voice steady but trembling at the edges. "Garrett, he's just expressing how he feels." "So now my own son is turning against me?" Garrett snapped. His voice rose, the heat of anger mixing with guilt he refused to acknowledge. Sam's breath quickened. "I'm not Daddy, I'm not." But Garrett grabbed the drawing, crumpling it in his fist. "I am your father, not him. Do you understand?" Sam's eyes filled instantly with tears. Harper reached for the drawing, pulling Garrett's wrist away with more force than she realized she had. "Stop," she said, her voice raw. "You're scaring him." Garrett's eyes flicked between her and Sam, fury darkening his expression. "This is your doing," he hissed. "You're poisoning him against me. One of a." Harper stepped back, shielding Sam with her body. "No, you're doing that all by yourself." The room fell silent except for Sam's quiet sobs. Garrett stared at them, mother and child pressed together, united in fear, and something in his gaze shifted from anger to calculation. Harper felt the change. It frightened her more than the yelling. Because men like Garrett didn't retreat. They regrouped. And that night, as he turned away without another word, she sensed he was planning something she wouldn't see coming. And the very next morning, she would discover exactly how far Garrett was willing to go. The following morning, Harper walked into the art studio with a heaviness she could not shake. Sam held her hand tightly, his steps smaller than usual. Last night's confrontation still lingered like a bruise beneath the skin. She tried to smile as she greeted the children arriving for class, but her voice lacked its usual warmth. The studio manager, Mrs. Calhoun, a woman known for her strict professionalism, approached with a clipped tone. "Harper, may I speak with you in my office?" Those words alone made Harper's stomach drop. Inside the small, glass-walled office, Mrs. Calhoun folded her hands atop a stack of papers. "We received a complaint this morning," she said. "From a parent." Harper blinked. "A complaint? About what?" Mrs. Calhoun hesitated, then slid a printed email across the desk. The sender's name hit Harper like a punch. Garrett Sloan. Her breath hitched as she read the accusations, claims that Harper's emotional instability was affecting the children, that she exposed them to inappropriate themes through art, that she had created a hostile environment for Sam due to parental alienation. End quote. It was a calculated attack, cold, articulate, and designed to destroy her credibility. "This isn't true," Harper said, her voice trembling. "None of this is true." "I want to believe that," Mrs. Calhoun replied softly, "but it's serious, and the board expects us to address it. There will need to be a review, possibly a suspension during the investigation." A suspension. Harper felt her world tilt. Her job wasn't glamorous, but it was her refuge, her one space untouched by Garrett's shadows. Losing it would mean losing the only income she controlled and losing the stability Sam needed. "I would never harm these children," Harper whispered, "especially not my own." Mrs. Calhoun's eyes softened. "I know, but the board doesn't, and Garrett Sloan is influential." Influential. That word hung heavy in the air. Garrett had used his status to corner her, and she hadn't even seen it coming. Harper felt her pulse race as she stepped out of the office, the hallway blurring around her. She found Sam waiting in the corner, clutching his small watercolor set. "Mommy, what's wrong?" he asked. She knelt, hugging him so tightly he squeaked. "Nothing you need to worry about, sweetheart." But inside, she felt the first true wave of panic. Garrett wasn't just angry. He was preparing to erase her. And just as she gathered her things to leave early, the studio door opened, revealing a familiar tall figure with a calm expression that pierced through the chaos. Rowan Mercer had arrived. And he wasn't here by coincidence. Rowan Mercer stepped into the studio with the calmness of someone who understood storms because he had lived through his own. His presence alone seemed to steady the room, though Harper could barely lift her eyes to meet his. Her cheeks were flushed, her breath unsteady. Rowan sensed everything instantly. "I came to return Sam's jacket," he said gently, holding up the small blue coat. But his eyes searched Harper's face, reading the distress she was trying to hide. Mrs. Calhoun approached him immediately, smoothing her blazer. "Mr. Mercer, we weren't expecting." "I was nearby," Rowan replied. His tone was polite but carried an edge of authority that shifted the atmosphere. "Is everything all right?" Harper opened her mouth, but no words formed. Mrs. Calhoun cleared her throat. "We're handling a small, internal matter." Rowan glanced at the papers in Harper's shaking hands. He didn't need to read the details. He recognized accusation when he saw it. "Is this about a complaint?" he asked quietly. Mrs. Calhoun hesitated. "It's confidential." Rowan nodded once, slowly. "Of course. Then you won't mind if I speak with Harper privately." He guided Harper toward the empty hallway near the supply closet, lowering his voice. "Harper, what did he do?" Her eyes filled instantly. "Garrett filed a complaint. He's trying to make them suspend me." And stated. Rowan inhaled sharply, the muscle in his jaw tightening, an expression he rarely showed. "Because he's afraid of losing control," he muttered. Harper wiped her cheek, embarrassed. "I can't lose this job, Rowan. I need it. Sam needs it." Rowan looked at her for a long moment, something shifting behind his steady gaze. "You won't lose it," she blinked. "You can't promise that." "I can," he said quietly, "because Mercer Arts Foundation funds 40% of this studio's annual budget." And as stated. Harper's breath caught. She had never connected the dots, never realized the man standing in front of her wasn't just a supportive parent, but a cornerstone of the institution she worked for. "I won't interfere inappropriately," Rowan continued, "but I will make sure lies don't destroy you. Not here. Not anywhere." His voice was soft, but there was steel beneath it, a quiet, controlled fury on her behalf. For the first time in months, Harper felt something lift off her chest, like she could breathe again. Not because she wanted rescue, but because someone finally stood with her instead of against her. Sam tugged on her sleeve then, his small voice breaking the moment. "Mommy, can we go home?" Harper nodded, squeezing his hand. Rowan stepped back, letting them pass, but his eyes followed them with a promise unspoken yet unmistakable. And later that night, as Harper checked her email, a new message appeared, sent anonymously. It contained something about Garrett that would shatter her world far more than the complaint ever could. The email Harper received that night sat unread for several minutes. Her hands shook too much to tap the screen. The sender's address was anonymous, but the subject line made her heart stall. "You deserve to know what he's planning." She finally opened it. Attached was a scanned document, legal paperwork, partially filled out, bearing Garrett's signature, a petition for full custody, a statement declaring Harper emotionally unfit, a financial disclosure showing all assets transferred out of their joint accounts. And one more attachment, a photo. Garrett and Madison, standing far too close in a dim hotel hallway, Madison wearing Harper's favorite shade of lipstick, Garrett looking as if he had no intention of hiding anything. Harper stared at the screen until her eyes blurred. Garrett wasn't just pushing her out of their life. He was erasing her. The next morning, as she walked Sam to the elevator, a figure stepped out, blocking their way. Madison Price, dressed in a fitted beige coat and smirking like someone who'd been waiting for this moment. "Well," Madison said, eyes sweeping over Harper's tired face, "looks like someone had a rough night." Harper stiffened. Sam hid behind her leg. Madison tilted her head. "Garrett thought you'd figure it out eventually. You know, the custody thing." Harper's pulse quickened. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, come on," Madison laughed. "He's divorcing you. Full custody to him. Clean break. He's moving on. You should too." Harper felt her breath catch. He can't take Sam. But Madison's smile only grew colder. He already has the paperwork. And the evidence he needs. Harper's stomach twisted. "Evidence?" Madison leaned in, lowering her voice. "You crying at work? Panic attacks? Struggling to pay rent if he leaves?" Garrett documented everything. "He's smarter than you give him credit for." Sam pressed closer, sensing danger. Harper felt herself trembling, but forced her voice steady. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about," Madison whispered. "Garrett promised me we'd start fresh. No messy ex-wife, no custody drama. Just us. And for..." Harper swallowed the ache rising in her throat. "He's using you too." Madison laughed, short and sharp. "Sweetheart, I'm not the one losing everything." Harper tightened her grip on Sam's hand. "You won't win." Madison's eyes gleamed. "I already have." But as she stepped into the elevator, tossing a cruel smile over her shoulder, something slipped from her designer purse, a folded piece of paper. Harper picked it up. It was another legal document, this one with Garrett's signature and Madison's. Harper unfolded it slowly, and her eyes widened. The date on the document proved Garrett had planned to replace her months before their last anniversary. The paper Madison dropped wasn't just a legal document, it was a map of betrayal. As Harper read the date printed neatly at the top, her stomach turned. Garrett had signed it months before their anniversary dinner, months before he'd kissed her cheek and placed a necklace around her neck as if they were still a family. He had been preparing for her disappearance long before she even sensed danger. That night, after putting Sam to bed, Harper forced herself to sit at the dining table, the sleek marble surface cold beneath her palms. She opened her laptop, logged into their joint bank account, and waited as the page loaded. Her breath caught. Balance, $42.17. She blinked, refreshing the page. Once, twice, again. The same numbers stared back at her. She checked their savings. Empty. Retirement account. Closed. Investment portfolio. Transferred out under Garrett's name. Her hands shook violently now. The man she trusted with her life had stripped her of every financial lifeline. Even worse, every transaction had been moved into a new private account, one she didn't recognize. One likely belonging to Madison. Harper pressed a trembling hand to her forehead. Oh God, what did you do? She clicked through statements, page after page, watching their life dissolve in neat digital lines. Hotel charges, jewelry purchases, high-end restaurants in Soho, car service trips at midnight, and larger transfers labeled asset diversification. Garrett's lies were not spontaneous, they were systematically crafted. A soft creak interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Sam stood in the hallway, rubbing his eyes. Mommy? Why are you crying? Harper wiped her face quickly, forcing a smile. I'm okay, sweetheart. Go back to bed. But as she tucked him in, Sam held onto her wrist. Mommy, are we going to be okay? His small voice broke her. Yes, she whispered, though she didn't believe it yet. After he drifted to sleep, Harper returned to the living room, staring at the skyline that once brought her comfort. Tonight, the city felt sharp, indifferent. She reached for her phone, scrolling to Garrett's number. Her thumb hovered over the call button, but she couldn't bring herself to dial. What would she even say? Instead, she typed a single sentence and sent it to him. Why did you take everything? She waited. Minutes passed, no reply. But another message appeared, one from an unknown number. A single line. You should check the house deed, Harper. Cold dread washed through her as she opened the property database and typed their address. Owner, Garrett Sloan. Secondary owner, Madison Price. And Harper Lane? Not listed anymore. Her breath left her body. Because now, Garrett hadn't just erased her from their accounts, he'd erased her from her own home. The night Harper learned she no longer owned the home she lived in, a strange quiet settled over her. Not peaceful quiet, more like the kind that follows an explosion when the dust hasn't even begun to fall. She sat on the cold living room floor, her back against the sofa, staring at nothing. The city lights glowed through the windows, but even Manhattan felt distant, unreachable. Her phone lay beside her, silent. Garrett hadn't replied. He wasn't going to. She wrapped her arms around herself, rocking slightly without realizing it. The betrayal pressed against her ribs like a weight she couldn't lift. How could Garrett take everything? How could he look at her after years of marriage, after promises made in front of family and God, and decide she was disposable? A soft sob escaped before she could stop it. She pressed a hand over her mouth, trying to contain herself. But the truth clawed its way through anyway. She had no savings, no legal claim to her home, no job security, and a man actively working to take her child from her. Mommy? Sam's voice drifted from the hallway. She hurriedly wiped her face, but he saw the truth anyway. Children always do. He patted over in his pajamas, crawling into her lap without a word. His small head rested against her chest, grounding her in the simplest, purest form of love she had left. Are we still a family? He whispered. Harper's throat tightened. Yes, sweetheart. You and I, we are always a family. He nodded against her sweater, satisfied with her answer, even if she wasn't. Eventually, he drifted back to sleep, and Harper tucked him into bed, smoothing his hair until his breathing steadied. Then she stood in the hallway, staring at the closed door. How much more could she lose before she disappeared entirely? She walked to the balcony, stepping into the cold night air. The wind whipped her hair across her face, the chill sharp enough to make her gasp. Below her, the streets buzzed with life, couples laughing, taxis honking, people living their ordinary lives. For a moment, Harper imagined letting the numbness consume her, just giving up. Letting Garrett win, letting life shrink until it had no space left for her. Then her phone vibrated. She almost ignored it, expecting more silence. But the notification made her freeze. A deposit of $25,000 has been added to your account. Her breath stilled. She hadn't asked for money. She hadn't told anyone about the empty accounts. Another message appeared. You're not alone, Harper. Check your email. No name, no details. But she knew the voice behind those words. And when she opened her inbox, Rowan Mercer's message would change the course of everything. Harper opened Rowan's email with trembling hands. The subject line was simple, for you and Sam. Inside, there was no explanation for the unexpected deposit, just a request. Please meet me tomorrow morning at the Mercer Arts Annex. Bring Sam, you're safe there. Safe. A word she hadn't felt in months. The next morning, she bundled Sam in his coat and left the Park Avenue apartment before Garrett woke. The winter air stung her cheeks, but the brisk walk steadied her nerves. When she arrived at the Mercer Annex, a restored brick building near Central Park, West Rowan was waiting by the door, dressed in a charcoal coat, expression gentle yet focused. "Thank you for coming," he said, opening the door for her and Sam. Inside, the annex felt nothing like the sterile luxury she was used to. Warm wooden floors, sunlight pouring through tall windows, children's artwork decorated along the walls. It felt lived in. Human, real. Rowan guided them to a quiet lounge room. "Sit," he said softly. Harper hesitated. "Rowan, the money? You don't owe me an explanation," he said, "but I think you need some help, and I can give it without expecting anything in return." Her eyes stung. "Why? Why would you do that?" Rowan paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because I've been where you are. When my ex-wife left, she took everything that wasn't nailed down. Things I thought were permanent vanished overnight, and I know what it's like to feel cornered." Harper listened, stunned. She'd never imagined a man so composed carried scars of his own. Rowan continued, "You and Sam don't belong in a home where you feel hunted. I want you to stay in the Mercer residence temporarily," he added quickly, not wanting to overwhelm her. "A private suite, secure. No one can reach you there without clearance." Harper blinked in disbelief. "Rowan, that's too much." "It's not," he said. "It's necessary." Sam tugged Harper's sleeve. "Mommy, can we stay? It feels nice here." Rowan smiled at the boy, then looked at Harper again. "You don't have to decide today. Just know you have a place to go. A safe one." Harper exhaled shakily, her resolve weakening. It had been so long since someone offered her something without strings. Then the door buzzed. Rowan's assistant rushed in, breathless. "Mr. Mercer, you need to see this. It's urgent." Rowan's eyes narrowed. "What happened?" The assistant handed him a tablet. Harper couldn't see the screen, but she heard Rowan's soft curse under his breath. He turned to her slowly, expression darkening. "Harper, Garrett just filed something in court this morning, and it changes everything." Rowan handed Harper the tablet slowly, giving her a chance to prepare herself. But nothing could have prepared her for the bold black letters staring back at her. Emergency petition for immediate temporary custody. Garrett Sloan versus Harper Lane. Filed at 6:14 a.m. He didn't even wait for the sun to rise before trying to take Sam. Harper's knees weakened. Rowan stepped closer, steadying her with a hand beneath her elbow. "He's accelerating his plan," Rowan said, voice low. "He wants control before you can fight back." Harper swallowed hard. "How am I supposed to fight him? He has everything. Money, lawyers, influence." Rowan shook his head. "Not everything." She looked up, confused, but he didn't elaborate. Instead, he guided her and Sam into a small private studio inside the annex, a room filled with canvases, brushes, and soft natural light. "Sit," he told her gently. Harper hesitated. "What are we doing? I want you to look at something." Rowan walked toward a shelf where several of the children's paintings were drying. "This is Sam's work from last week, isn't it?" Harper nodded. "Bright colors. Sharp little shapes." She had always admired how expressive he was. Rowan tapped the corner of the canvas. "Here." Harper squinted. At first, she saw nothing unusual, just a pattern of bright squares. But when Rowan adjusted the light, she saw lines she hadn't noticed before. Overlapping numbers, repeated symbols. And then, something unmistakable. A logo. The stylized crest of Sloan Capital Holdings, Garrett's company. "What is that doing in my son's painting?" Harper whispered. Rowan sighed. "Because Sam painted what he saw." "Children don't lie with their art, Harper." Her pulse quickened. "Saw? Saw what?" Rowan leaned closer to the painting. "These numbers, they're not random. They're from a ledger page." "A ledger?" Harper repeated. Rowan looked directly at her. "A financial ledger, specifically an internal report from Sloan Capital. A very specific, very illegal one." Harper felt the room tilt. "Illegal?" Rowan nodded grimly. "Your son must have seen Garrett looking at documents he shouldn't have. Numbers tied to off-book transfers, shell accounts, and someone Garrett shouldn't be associated with." Harper pressed a hand to her chest. Sam had accidentally painted evidence. Rowan stepped closer. "Harper, listen to me. This isn't just a custody battle anymore. Garrett may be involved in something federal, something dangerous. She stared at him, stunned. What does that mean for us? Before Rowan could answer, the annex door slammed open. His assistant rushed in, pale. Mr. Mercer, agents are here. Federal agents, they're asking for you. Rowan's expression changed sharp, controlled, ready. He turned to Harper. Stay with me. Everything is about to unfold, and you need to be protected. Harper's heart pounded as two federal agents in dark suits stepped into the annex lobby. Their presence filled the space with a gravity she could feel in her bones. Sam clung to her hand, sensing something important was unfolding. One of the agents addressed Rowan with sharp respect. Mr. Mercer, we need to discuss the new evidence you forwarded last night. Harper's eyes widened. You? Forwarded evidence? Rowan exhaled slowly. Harper, there's something I haven't told you, not to deceive you, only because I wanted you to have stability before you had more fear. 18. The agent nodded. Mr. Mercer has been assisting us with a financial investigation. Harper blinked, confused. Assisting? Why would? Rowan turned toward her, voice steady, controlled. Because your husband has been under federal scrutiny for almost a year. The words struck her like cold water. Rowan continued. Garrett's company has been flagged repeatedly for suspicious transactions. Shell companies, offshore accounts, money movement that doesn't align with reported earnings. End of picture. Harper shook her head slowly. But he always said the business was thriving. The agent gave a tight smile. Criminal enterprises often look like they're thriving right before they collapse. Rowan stepped closer, his voice gentler. Harper, I didn't want to overwhelm you, especially while you were dealing with his infidelity. But when I saw Sam's painting, I realized your son had unintentionally captured information we'd been missing. End quote. Sam, oblivious to the weight of the moment, looked up. I just drew what Daddy had on his papers. Harper's throat closed. Her child had stumbled into a world he shouldn't even know exists. Rowan continued. Your safety and Sam's became a concern the moment that painting surfaced. Garrett isn't just a selfish man, Harper. He may be desperate, and desperate people can be dangerous. Harper felt dizzy. The man she once trusted to protect her had become a threat she didn't know how to navigate. What happens now? She whispered. The agent answered, we may need your cooperation, and you should not return home under any circumstances. Harper swallowed hard, looking from the stern federal agents to Rowan's calm, protective presence. Rowan's expression softened. You'll stay at the Mercer residence tonight. I'll make arrangements. No one will get to you there. In I day. Suddenly, the annex doors swung open again, this time with frantic energy. Rowan's assistant rushed in, breathless. Sir, there's news. Big news. It's about Sloan Capital. Rowan tensed. What happened? The assistant hesitated, then handed him a phone showing a breaking news alert. Harper saw Rowan's face change, the calm replaced with something far heavier. Harper, Garrett just disappeared. If you want us, Garrett Sloan disappearing was not the kind of news that made people whisper, it made them freeze. The headline blared across Rowan's phone in bold red letters. CEO of Sloan Capital, missing amid federal investigation. Harper stared at the screen as if it were written in another language. Disbelief washed through her, followed by a cold wave of dread. Rowan lowered the phone. He's running. Harper shook her head. Garrett wouldn't run. He's too proud. 2. Pride evaporates fast when prison becomes a possibility, Rowan replied quietly. The federal agents exchanged looks and began speaking rapidly into their radios. Sam, sensing the tension, squeezed Harper's hand tighter. Is Daddy in trouble? He whispered. The room fell still. Harper knelt beside him. Sweetheart, Daddy made some wrong choices, but you're safe, I promise. Rowan placed a reassuring hand on Sam's shoulder. We're going to make sure your mom is safe too. In first tone, Sam nodded, trusting Rowan with a simplicity that broke Harper's heart. One of the agents approached Rowan. We need to question Miss Lane privately. She may have insight into his associates, his habits, places he might go. Rowan looked at Harper. Are you comfortable with that? She wasn't. But she nodded anyway. The agent led her to a smaller room, dimly lit and quiet. Miss Lane, has your husband ever mentioned offshore accounts? Unregistered properties? Contacts outside the country? Harper shook her head. I barely knew what he did at the office. He kept everything separate. I thought it was normal. The agent leaned forward. Did he ever hint at someone helping him move money? Someone inside the company or outside it? Memories flickered. Garrett's late-night calls, his sudden temper, the hushed conversations he took on the balcony. The way Madison once slipped and said, "He told me everything would be ready soon." Harper swallowed. Madison Price. She knows more than she pretends. The agent scribbled something quickly. "We suspected her. Your confirmation helps." When Harper stepped back into the annex lobby, Rowan was waiting, coat in hand. Outside, black SUVs had lined the street, federal presence increasing. Reporters were gathering behind barricades, cameras flashing. Rowan gently touched her elbow. "We're leaving through the back. I won't let them swarm you." Harper felt a shiver, not from fear, but from the unfamiliar sensation of someone truly protecting her. As they exited through a service door, Rowan's driver held open a sleek Mercedes. Sam climbed in first, clutching his stuffed bear. Harper hesitated at the doorway, glancing back at the chaotic street. "Rowan, what if Garrett comes after us?" she whispered. Rowan met her gaze, his voice steady and absolute. "He won't get the chance, Harper, because someone else found him first." Garrett Sloan wasn't found by the FBI first. He was found by fear. The news broke just as Rowan's Mercedes pulled into the private garage beneath the Mercer residence, a secure building overlooking Central Park. Rowan's assistant hurried toward them, holding her phone as if it were evidence itself. "They found him," she said breathlessly, "but it's complicated." Harper felt Sam cling to her side. "Is Daddy okay?" he whispered. The assistant hesitated. "He's alive." But he wasn't alone. Rowan's expression hardened. "Where?" "A hotel in Midtown. The Plaza." Harper's heart sank. Of course it would be the Plaza, a place Garrett had once promised to take her for an anniversary he later forgot. A place he instead shared with Madison. The assistant continued. "He was trying to check out under a fake name. Security recognized him. When authorities arrived, Madison was already there, packing her things." Harper swallowed, her pulse racing. Was she helping him escape? A humorless laugh escaped the assistant. No, she was helping herself. She told security Garrett had forced her into everything. She showed them texts claiming he manipulated her. She threw him under the bus in under 30 seconds. Harper closed her eyes. She shouldn't have been surprised. Madison was loyal only to herself. Garrett, blinded by ego, had never seen it. Rowan guided Harper and Sam toward the private elevator. "This was inevitable," he murmured. "Men like Garrett believe they can outrun consequences. They never can." Inside the elevator, Harper finally asked, "What happens to him now?" Rowan looked at her gently. "He'll be taken into federal custody. There will be hearings, investigations. He won't be coming home." Home. The word felt strange now. What home? The apartment she'd been erased from? The life she'd been cut out of? As the doors opened into the spacious, quiet suite Rowan had arranged, Harper felt her knees weaken. The warmth, the soft lighting, the safety had overwhelmed her senses. It had been so long since she'd felt protected. Sam ran toward the large window overlooking the park. "Mommy, look, it's like the trees are glowing." Harper managed a small smile. "Yes, sweetheart, it's beautiful." Affection. But beauty couldn't erase the fear swirling in her chest. A sudden knock startled both of them. Rowan stepped forward cautiously. A security guard handed him a sealed envelope with a stern nod. "This just arrived for Miss Lane, delivered by a federal courier." Harper reached for it with trembling hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A confession, signed by Garrett. And as Harper read the first devastating sentence, her breath caught. "Harper, if anything happens to me, it won't be the FBI you need to fear." The custody hearing was scheduled 3 days after Garrett's arrest. 3 days that felt both impossibly short and unbearably long. Harper barely slept, replaying every memory, every argument, every moment she had shielded Sam from a man who cared more about control than love. Rowan stayed nearby, never overstepping, but always present, offering steady ground when everything else felt like quicksand. The courthouse in Lower Manhattan buzzed with reporters, their lenses trained on the entrance like vultures sensing a wounded animal. Rowan placed a reassuring hand on Harper's back as they walked past the cameras. Sam held her hand tightly, his small fingers fitting perfectly into hers. Inside, Garrett sat at the front table in handcuffs, dressed in a wrinkled jumpsuit. The man who once strutted through boardrooms now looked hollow, panicked. He tried to catch Harper's eye, but she kept her gaze forward. When the judge entered, silence washed over the courtroom. Garrett's lawyer spoke first, attempting to paint Harper as unstable, financially incapable, easily overwhelmed. But his arguments sounded thin, desperate, especially with federal agents sitting quietly behind him, men whose presence suggested far more serious matters than parenting disputes. Then it was Harper's turn. She stood slowly, hands trembling, but voice surprisingly steady. "Your Honor," she began, "I never wanted my marriage to end this way. I never wanted Sam to see the things he saw, but I cannot pretend my husband was the man he claimed to be." She spoke of the nights Garrett didn't come home. The fear in Sam's eyes, the financial betrayal, the documents he forged to erase her. She did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She simply told the truth, one painful fact at a time. Sam's small voice followed, after the judge gently asked if he wanted to share anything. "I want to stay with Mommy," he whispered. "She comes home, she listens, she doesn't yell." That single sentence carried more weight than any lawyer's speech. The judge leaned back, exhaling heavily. "Given the evidence and the ongoing federal investigation, I see no grounds to grant Mr. Sloan custody. Full custody is awarded to Miss Harper Lane." Effective immediately, Garrett surged to his feet. "You can't do this. She ruined everything." The bailiff restrained him. Harper didn't flinch. As she left the courtroom, gripping Sam's hand, reporters shouted questions. Rowan stepped between them, shielding her with his presence without touching her. Outside on the courthouse steps, Rowan met her eyes. "Harper, it's over. You won." Harper exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. But before relief could fully flood her, her phone vibrated an unknown number. She answered cautiously. A cold voice crackled through the speaker. "Congratulations, Harper, but you have no idea what Garrett was involved in or what his enemies think you know." The call ended abruptly, leaving Harper standing on the courthouse steps with a chill running through her. But this time, she didn't crumble. She handed the phone to Rowan, who listened, eyes narrowing with quiet calculation. "It's a scare tactic," he said. "Garrett wasn't working with dangerous people. He was stealing from them. And now he's in federal custody, monitored every minute. They can't reach you. I won't allow it." For the first time, Harper believed him. Over the next several weeks, investigations intensified. Reports flooded the news. Garrett's crimes were laid bare with brutal clarity: fraud, embezzlement, manipulation of investors, falsified audits. Madison publicly denied involvement, but leaked messages showed she'd helped orchestrate the transfers. She was arrested days later. The world Garrett built on lies collapsed exactly the way lies do, all at once. Meanwhile, Harper settled into the Mercer residence, a sanctuary of quiet halls and warm light. Sam thrived, sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, painting in the sunny corner of the living room. One afternoon, as he mixed colors, he said softly, "Mommy, this feels like home." And Harper felt her heart finally loosen. Rowan kept his distance enough to respect her healing, but close enough that his presence became a steady warmth. He never pushed, never assumed. He simply showed up, something no one had ever consistently done for her. One evening, the foundation hosted a private showcase for young artists. Rowan asked Harper to display 2 of her own pieces, something she had never done before. Nervous but encouraged, she agreed. When guests stopped to admire her work, Harper felt something she hadn't felt in years: pride. Not the fragile kind that depended on someone else's approval. The quiet, rooted kind. After the event, Rowan found her standing by the balcony, overlooking Central Park. Lights shimmered through the trees, reflecting softly on the glass. "You did beautifully tonight," he said. Harper smiled, a real one. "It feels unreal. Everything that's happened, everything that's changed. Today." Rowan stepped closer, but gently. "You rebuilt your life, Harper. You protected your son. You told the truth when it was hardest to speak. That's strength most people never find." She looked at him, breath-catching. "I couldn't have done any of it alone." "You weren't meant to," he said, voice low. "And you don't have to from now on." He reached into his coat pocket, not with urgency, but with calm intent, and revealed a simple velvet box. Not flashy, not extravagant, just sincere. "I'm not asking for an answer tonight," Rowan said softly. "I'm asking for hope, for a future where you never have to doubt your worth again." Harper opened the box. Inside was a delicate ring, timeless, understated, beautiful. A ring chosen for someone treasured. Tears welled in her eyes, not from grief, from healing. She whispered, "Yes, Rowan, I'm ready." Sam ran toward them, laughing, wrapping his arms around them both. And for the first time, Harper felt her life settle into a place where fear couldn't reach her anymore. Because some endings aren't endings at all, they're the home you never thought you'd find. And just like that, our story comes to a close. If you're still here with us, my dear friends, then something in Harper's journey touched your heart in a way only life can. Maybe it reminded you of your own strength. Maybe it reminded you of what you deserve. Or maybe it whispered a little truth you've been trying to ignore. Harper's path teaches us one thing clearly. We survive more than we think we can, and we rise higher than we ever believed. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If it is endurable, then endure it. If it is not, then stop complaining. Your nature will carry you through." Healing isn't loud. It isn't sudden. It grows quietly, in the moments we choose ourselves again. So if you're listening to this now, know this. You are stronger than the storms you've walked through. You are worthy of peace, of love, of a life that feels like home. And you are never as alone as you think you are. If this story moved you even just a little, please like, share, and subscribe. Not for the numbers, but so more hearts can find the reminder they might need today. We're here with you, always.